So, Eric Love, I'm really pleased to have you on the Geospatial Index.
Yeah, great to be here and great to share what I've done. So I've made this web app called Mappage. It's been my hobby project for the last 16 years, and it does data visualizations, including maps and data stories. And it's mostly set up to census data from the Australian census. But yeah, a page on Adelaide house prices has been the most popular page I've put there, because house prices is what everyone in Adelaide is talking about. So this is just a map of Australia showing population in each state. Looks pretty simple, but we can, if we zoom in, it will break down. It'll show a different geographical level. So this is showing in what they call SA3, which in Adelaide matches the council areas. So you can see population there, and then zoom in further, and it'll break it down into small areas. But that's not showing very much information. So if we go to gallery of examples, I've set up a whole lot of different maps and things here. So this first one uses a color scale and shows what percentage of the residents of each state at the moment were born in Australia.
Fascinating. Yeah, I've always known about this.
We can zoom into say Melbourne, and now we can see how it varies around Melbourne.
This is a great way to visualize the cultural diversity in Australia. This is a great tool, Eric.
Yep, but then we might say, okay, well, what about born in China? So let's say if we're born in China and we've got the city, or we've got a certain band in the east, and we can choose any other country of birth. We can animate it so that it goes through from 2011 census to the 2021 with the one in between. Or perhaps we can look at, so the next link on the left gives us that's percentage born in Australia, but now it's a chart with a column for each area.
By state.
So each color is a state. We can make it just state. That's simpler, so that shows the different states and what percentage are born in Australia. But we can break it down further. SA4 is the next level down, so each state sort of breaks into 5 to 20 different regions. So that's those charts. What about?
So I got a question. Digging into the cultural diversity topic further. I remember one statistic when I was studying at uni, I think at Flinders. I was just stunned at how high the proportion of households was that did not speak English at home. Like it was north of 60%, if I recall correctly. Do you have any of those sorts of stats?
Which area?
I can't remember exactly, but do you have language spoken at home?
So this is the language spoken at home. So it is 3/4 English, and that's for the whole of Australia. And you can move the rest around, see what the different other languages are. Mandarin is high, Vietnamese is more than 1%, Arabic is 1.5%, but it's mostly just speaking English.
Okay, so I got that wrong, but at least there's a significant proportion that
depends where you are. So if we change residents to, say we're in Victoria, there's a bit more, and if we're in say Melbourne inner, then it's going to be not that much different. But yeah, so that will vary depending where you are. Maybe the inner part of Melbourne inner, so Melbourne City, which is then you're down to there. If you go one in further, and this is now,
if you go to Parkville, that's where I lived when I studied at Melbourne Uni. That would be interesting.
Okay, so that's what it is there. And so yeah, a lot of Chinese, but a good mix of Indian. That's at the moment. There weren't so many when you're a student. 2% Spanish, that would be students. Yeah, so that's pie charts. But if you think, oh, this English piece is too big, let's click on there, exclude English, and then you see all the others. I didn't plan to make a big complicated thing that would take a lot of my time. It sort of grew a bit at a time. So as the name suggests, Mappage was originally just maps. It was kind of my all-purpose, what do I want to put on a Google map today? And it was originally just sort of markers and captions, but then I started bringing in the census data, and then I thought, oh, why just do maps? Let's do other sorts of visualizations. And then, oh, we should tell data stories, and oh, I should add a coding system so I could do more things, and so it just grew and grew.
And did you say it was in Java or JavaScript?
Mostly JavaScript. So
JavaScript.
Over 15,000 lines of JavaScript probably. So the majority of it is running in the browser. A little bit of PHP on the server, and some Python used to kind of import the data and get it to different formats.
Right.
So I'll show you a few more complicated ones. Stacked column chart. So this is the language breakdown in each age group. So when you get to these ages, it's mostly English only speakers, but if you're in the 30s, then there's a big percentage of people who speak Indian languages. 8% of 30s people in the whole country are sort of Indian background. And plain lists, like the number of people who speak each Indigenous language in Australia in the census. Yep. And there's a whole lot of Indigenous languages that I suppose we're more aware of these days, but there's a whole lot of small language groups around the country.
Incredible.
And let's so we can do complicated things like scatter plots. So this is each area in Victoria. X-axis is the index of disadvantage. So poorer places to the left, more well-off places to the right. And the Y-axis is what proportion of people were born in South Africa. So I use this to compare any two variables like that where where if they're both things I can look at geographically, you can compare the two.
So hang on, this is for a given locality, like Ballarat is a town or a small city northwest-ish of Melbourne, if I recall correctly. I really love that place. I worked there a few times. Incredibly cold in the winter, in the morning, if I recall. Okay, so as the where is Ballarat on this?
It'll be somewhere here. Let me see if where's my color scale? Normally I'd have a color scale there, but I don't.
There it is. There it is, just under Victoria.
Yeah. So I guess if we click Ballarat, now we're showing the parts in Ballarat.
Okay.
And where they are. Yeah. So Ballarat kind of ranges a long way between. So the Ballarat area. Maryborough is the most disadvantaged, and Buninyong is the least disadvantaged. So you can see the different parts, and
so the correlation is 6. The R value was 0.64 basically, or 0.6. So is it saying that as the proportion of South Africans increases, the degree of disadvantage decreases?
That's right. So
okay, there we go.
So South Africans in Australia tend to be more well off, and tend to live in more well off areas.
Fascinating.
Here's one that is a bit more, I suppose, a simple thing, but this is all the suburbs and localities in South Australia, The places that are Mount something are red. About a quarter of the suburbs in Adelaide are called something park. They're all in dark green. The ones with field in their name are light green. The ones with port in their name are blue, so you can see more of them around the coast. And the ones with saint in their name are purple.
Fascinating.
And
Love these quirks.
Yeah, something a bit more with a bit more data. This is the most common language. So there are actually places in Sydney where English only is not the #1 language.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at before. I was stunned.
So yeah, most of Sydney. So in the census, they say, do you speak another language? If so, what? And so most of the people who speak other languages also speak English, okay, but it's the other language that they're counting. And so so in this place, for instance, it's just over. Oh, that's a trivial small area, but here's a place where Vietnamese just edges out English, and this place 54% Vietnamese in Cabramatta Lansdale. Burwood 36% Mandarin. And there's this one, Auburn North, English only is not in the top 3.
Yep, amazing.
So Nepali, Mandarin, and Urdu are the top 3, and English only is less than 10%.
Fascinating.
Are
there any parts of Melbourne like that?
Not where. So let's change this to Victoria. I don't think not where. So there's places where English is not first. So we've got Sunshine, St Albans, where Vietnamese comes first. Punjabi is first in Tarneek North, with 27%. So there's quite a mix of other languages, probably other Indian languages making up a lot of the numbers there. Springvale Vietnamese is big, and here that's little. What have they got in the city? Melbourne CBD North Mandarin 36, English 25. So yeah, there are places where the English only speakers are quite the minority. But then
you can see that walking down the street if you go.
Yeah. Go to anywhere sort of out in the country and it'll be more than 90% only speak English.
And I saw there was some Tagalog there, so that shows that out in the country areas.
Yes.
Another thing I'm aware of is that there are some immigrant workers from the Philippines, for example, on farms. So that seems to also match my experience.
Yep. And Karen, I've got Karen friends, and there's a lot of them in Mount Gambier and certain places. I think in Ballarat actually.
Where is that language from?
Karen is Burmese, so on the Thai-Burma border area.
Interesting.
Now, do we want to jump into the really complicated stuff or the real estate map?
Do some more complicated stuff. Hit us.
Okay. So we go back to. So this is our original one. So when I made this, I guess more than 5 years ago, there's on the right-hand side, there was a whole lot of controls saying what you wanted to see, and you could change the settings, and then the map or the chart would change. But around 2019, I added this code system. So we have a mini language here. And this changes what you see. So we've got one line that defines which data table, which in this case is the number of people by place of residence and birthplace. And then we define some.
So you're saying you can change these parameters?
Yep. So this is saying birthplace 11, which is Australia. So SE2 is, so SE is for selector. This is a selector that doesn't do anything. This is a selector that does born in Australia. Then you've got this line specifies that we are going to look at all the places of residence, and that's going to be our array A1. And this AUF just says it's auto map, which means it will change level of detail depending on your zoom level, but it's currently at STE, state or territory level. And then it's saying for each residence, N1 is get from our data source and filter it through selector 1, which does nothing. So this gets you the number of people in each area. This is N2, says get that N1, but filter it through selector 2, which is our born in Australia. So N2 is the number of people born in Australia in each area. Then for each area, P1 is N2 divided by N1, so that gives us our percentage. And then the next two lines are just tricks to give us a color scale. And then the complicated line at the bottom says, give us a map with colored polygons. And this is a thing that defines what you'll see when you run the mouse over it.
Yeah.
And it will use the colors that we've worked out according to this percentage. And so if we run it, then that's what we get. But if we go back to code and we change it to, so let's change it to born in the UK, and now it says 21 here. So okay. So changing settings here has changed the code.
Awesome.
And then then we see that reflected. And I didn't realise that 8.9% of people in Western Australia were born in the UK. So
is that the highest proportion? The state with the highest proportion, is it? Fascinating.
Yeah. So I was just reading today actually that Ireland has the highest. So if I make it UK and Ireland, then that's 9.6 of people in Western Australia. And if you add in,
but that's not the raw numbers, that's proportions.
That's the proportion.
It's not as though most of them necessarily are going to that state. It's just that relative to other origins,
that's right,
it's the highest.
Yeah. So New South Wales, which is a bigger state, has 300,000. Western Australia has 250,000, but in New South Wales, it's only 3.7%.
Interesting.
I want to add in the South Africans, because I know there's a lot of South Africans in Western Australia. So I add that in there, and now that's 11.2% of Western Australia were born in UK, Ireland, South Africa.
Fascinating. So you've got two colored columns over there on the right with F and a percentage.
Yeah, so F is for filter, which I'm not using. So so that was in our code, that's SE1. So these SEs correspond to a column over here. So SE1 is a filter with nothing. SE2 is the filter that gives you the numerator. So I've labeled it as percentage, and so that in this case it's birthplace, UK, Ireland, South Africa. So it adds them together when it calculates N2 and then the percentage.
Okay, and you can check those boxes in the GUI if you want, and again, the code will update. Okay, that's really cool. Yep. So essentially what you're showing us is that if people learn to code according to your system, they'll be able to interact in a more powerful way.
Yeah, so I mean, I made the code system for me. If I was making it for other people, I'd have to make it easier to use. And I do have plans for how I might kind of bring together this right-hand side and the code system, but it's a bit ambitious.
Sure. Amazing.
But yeah,
So
I do sometimes do things like control click on not stated, so I exclude them from the denominator. So some of my calculations I want to remove not stated, and it just brings up the percentage a little bit, but keeps the raw numbers the same. I might want to say, or what percentage of the people from sub-Saharan Africa are from South Africa. So that filters there, and then the map will look a whole lot different.
So what is that doing exactly with people from sub-Saharan?
Okay. Right. So now we've filtered it. Now the denominator is people from sub-Saharan Africa, and the numerator is people from South Africa. So we find in Queensland and New South Wales that majority of the people from sub-Saharan Africa are actually from the country of South Africa.
Okay, so 60%.
That's a different proportion.
Interesting. And you control that simply by hitting the checkbox for sub-Saharan Africa.
Yep.
And the percentage box for South Africa.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we see that reflected in here. So the code system is there so that I can put complicated things, but most things you can get to. Well, most things you should be able to get to by the controls over here. In practice, it doesn't always work for various reasons, and that's something I want to change in the future. But certainly, when you get a map showing a certain thing, changing those settings is the boxes were there before the code system was there.
Fascinating. So I guess this is a great system for, in some sort of intuitive and interactive way, interrogating census data. So inevitably, the question is how easy it is to update it once the new lot of census data comes around. It's only every 10 years, right, in Australia?
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
But it is difficult, and it's not even every 5 years. Every time you want a topic that isn't in the database yet. So for this lot, I would have had to go to the Australian Bureau of Statistics site and use their tool and say, I want all the places of residence down to this geographical level and all the countries of birth, and queue that table and download it, and then run that through some of my other tools.
Okay, so is there, because you had an animation in there for one of the variables, so yes, does that mean?
So that means that in this case, I have that table populated for 3 different census years. So, okay. So 2011, 2016, and 2021.
Great. Okay, so it does show that you can put the data from multiple censuses in there, and come up with some sort of comparison over multiple of these events. Yes. All right, but it is kind of down to you as the administrator of the system to decide to go and get that data from the ABS website and stick it in.
Yes, if the ABS had an API that would let me say what things I wanted, then that would have saved me a lot of time, and it would mean that I could make a lot more things available through here.
Yeah, so that's surprising they don't have an API.
Well, they do have an API for some things, but not for getting. So I use the tool called Table Builder, and so that lets you specify what variables you want, what level of detail, and it's not even instant. If it's a lot, you have to queue the table, and if it's a small one, it'll be there straight away. If it's a large one, you have to come back in a few minutes or a bit more.
Okay, interesting. All right.
So great. If there's some country whose Census Bureau does have an API that lets you download an arbitrary combination of variables on demand, then I could set the system up to get those things and show them much more quickly.
Yeah, I'm just imagining, it'd make it a much more powerful experience, but yeah, nevertheless, for what it does contain, I like it. It's really insightful and helps, I think, regular Australians understand their country more. So yeah, thanks in the first part of this episode, for this tour of the nature of the Australian population and how it's that information in its geographic distribution. All right, so yeah, for the last bit of the episode, I guess it would be great to see what this tool can do from the perspective of real estate.
Yeah, so this is a map showing the median house price in each suburb. So this is.
And what year is this? Sorry.
This at the moment it is the 12 months up to the middle of this year.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but we can see all of it. So it'll take a while to load all the years, but we've got it going back to 2014. So this is animating from 2014 to the present day.
Okay, so 2014, there's been a bit of inflation since then. Is it nominal numbers or inflation adjusted?
No, it's just the so now it's the quarterly numbers. Yep. In fact, the biggest changes have been since the start of COVID. So back in 2019, when I was living up here where the houses are the cheapest, some of these suburbs were around the 200,000 mark. And if you go to, especially the most recent quarter, those prices have more than doubled.
Incredible.
So
how do you know? I'm putting you on the spot here, but a significant a proportion of that increase must be explained by inflation. No.
Yeah. So there is inflation. I'm not familiar with inflation rates, but definitely there's been there's been ordinary inflation over the last 10 years, but and with houses in Adelaide, they stayed relatively flat for a long time, and so in hindsight we would say they were undervalued, but nobody knew that there was going to be COVID and a generous stimulus by the government in response, and that lots of rich investors would want things to do with their money and send all the prices to the moon. I was close to buying nearly the cheapest house in Adelaide. I put lowball offers on the two cheapest houses that didn't need repair, which would have been laughably cheap if I'd got one of them. And they would now be, one of those houses would now be worth more than double. I love 5 years on.
I love the spirit of your approach to investing. I have a similar one, but I do it with companies in the stock market rather than bothering, with an actual physical property. But yeah, still great stuff.
I wanted an actual physical property to live in. Not I wasn't so much thinking of investment, but I was looking for a house to live in, and getting a place to rent was too many hoops. So I thought, well, I'll see if I can buy one, and it would have been a good investment, if nothing else. But so now these $1 million suburbs, which Melbourne and Sydney have been used to for a long time, they're now part of the map of Adelaide.
Incredible. So where it's blue, it's more than 1 million.
So if I'll change it to, in fact, I will change it to the page where I've got this set up more properly. So this is an example of a data story. I've just written this in WordPress, and I've written certain, if I do something underlined in WordPress, that'll turn into one of these links, and each one changes that lot of code that's there.
Sorry, can we just step back a bit? You used the term data story. So data stories is a function of Mappage.
Yeah, so I can write a little article like this. I write that in on a WordPress site that Mappage loads in, and I'll write certain strings into it. So anything that's underlined, I've got codes that will turn into these
hyperlink,
symbols that will then change it to something else. So, this
is it just you that can? Sorry for interrupting, but just to illustrate the functionality of Mappage more generally before we step into this. So, is this something that general users of Mappage can set up a data story, or is it just you?
It's just me at the moment, but okay. If someone else wanted to, I could set things up to do that.
Cool. Okay, I won't interrupt anymore. I just want to make sure that all the functions of Mappage were properly illustrated.
But so this is just showing which suburbs are $1 million. So yeah, Adelaide's interesting in that the richer places are sort of on the east, away from the beach, although the actual beach suburbs are also in the 7 figures now. And then this is another variation of it where it just puts it into 5 bands. So light blue is $1 million and up, dark blue is 1.5 million.
Okay, and for listeners who are not from Australia, $1 million Australian dollars is about £500,000, and so
3 of ours to 2 American dollars.
Okay, so 600,000 US dollars. Would that be about right?
So dark blue is 1.5 million of ours, which is 1 million American. And yes, the light blue is 6 or 7, and 500 for green. Green is 500 and up.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So yeah, originally I just so someone made their own map with a GIS tool, just showing the median price in each suburb. Put it up on Reddit, and I commented, oh yeah, if I had the data, I could make a web version of this. And so someone pointed me to where there was a free data source, and so I spent some hours loading that in and getting it working here. And then someone said, oh, can you do it just in a 2-color version? Can you do it just in a 5-color version? And so I made those different ones, and they continued to get more hits. And so I thought, I'll update this next time there's a quarterly update. And because there were 3 different links I posted, I thought I should just put them all into one story where people have access to all of them. So I added a few more things. So this is just 3 individual suburbs and what their prices were each quarter over the whole timeline. And you can go into here and do any other suburb. So
wow, so from 2020, it's just been a runaway price increase. And I guess something to say for non-locals is that these are known as, somewhat cheaper areas of Adelaide.
Yeah, the Paralelli and Paravista are cheaper ones. Paradise is a bit above average. Yeah. But the cheapest ones are the Elizabeth area, and they are the ones that have
oh my goodness.
Yeah, so Elizabeth Downs, I was gonna buy a house in Elizabeth Downs. It was at the low end of there. So but any of the Elizabeth area, they've all gone from sort of 200 and gone to the moon.
This is fascinating. So inevitably the question is, have house prices increased so much that they're now out of reach given incomes?
Well, if you're comparing them to incomes, then yes, but people are getting more of their money from inheritances compared to income than in previous years.
That's an interesting statistic too.
I think. I mean, I'm not.
That's a bit of a macabre topic.
Oh yeah,
Does
yeah.
that say that there's more? The baby boomer generation is dying off. Sorry to put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, people are saying, oh, people on ordinary income can't buy a house. Well, that's because an ordinary income is only part of the money you'll get in your lifetime, and you'll get quite possibly a large share when you inherit from the previous generations. But I'll show a few more things. So this is this is median household income on the x-axis, and median house prices on the y-axis. And so the colors then is how many, and it's I'll change it to 2021 so it's a fairer comparison. It wasn't so bad then, but so the cheapest places you could get will be 3 years of income for a house, and the most expensive ones would be 16 years of income, for instance.
So my question then, relating to the previous line chart you had, where there was this runaway effect in house prices. So have you got a version of that line chart that is the multiple of years of income to buy a house? Because I want to know if there's a runaway effect there, because that's really the question.
I don't have that. I would have seen that in the finance part of the news one day. Those kind of things pop up on occasion. It's definitely gone up. Google around.
What's that guy who does finance on ABC?
Alan Kohler.
Alan Kohler, yeah, that's definitely an Alan Kohler statistic. I love that guy. And his son does shorts on YouTube about finance too these days. He's really great.
Yeah. No, that would be harder, because I would need to get the incomes from the different years. But so this is comparing 2021 prices, because the incomes I'm using are from the census in 2021. The other thing is that house prices doesn't include units. So these are the people living in separate houses, which are a large majority of all the homes, but still not all of the households. And so it's all of the households that are being measured when it comes to household income.
Okay, so again, to translate this for an international audience, a unit in Australia is where there are two dwellings, if you like, in a single overall house. So in London or Bristol in the UK, you've got terrace housing, but that's still not really what units are. A unit is like a single story apartment setup.
Yeah, so it says, or the long term is unit, flat, or apartment. Well, that's the census term, and then the census also defines separate houses, and there's an in-between category called semi-detached, and I think they count as part of the house total for these real estate ones.
Okay, but the point is that these are detached dwellings, is what you're saying? Detached
or semi-detached.
Okay, gotcha.
So the smaller ones, they won't count in here. I don't have that data, but interestingly, Adelaide's the only city where I did find data available for free. I went looking for the others because this is so popular. I thought, oh, I'll do the same for Melbourne and Sydney and get lots of hits. But I couldn't find any except for Melbourne, and there was too many issues with that data. I couldn't get it to line up with. Yeah, they use different locality identifiers within suburbs that I didn't have anything to link that with. So yeah, Adelaide.
Okay, so this is 2021, and somehow it does, the scatter plot does sort of relate to the runaway effect, or begin to answer that question, because at least bottom left, it's the number of years of average income for that area to pay for a median house. It's median number of years of median income to pay for a median house in that for a given district in Australia, right? Or SA.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is suburb level, and places like Glenelg North, they've got median household income. Okay, that's still reasonably high, but yeah. So a lot of those are rich areas, but a lot of them are rich retirees. Whereas over here the incomes are higher. But yeah, so that line is around the line of 6 years of income.
Okay, so what does the line mean?
Well, actually, it's not. Well, that's the trend line.
Oh, it's the correlation. Okay.
It doesn't necessarily go through the origin, but if you ran a line through the origin, that would be a line where they're all the same number of years. And in fact, that's what the color represents in this case.
Okay, so basically, yep.
So yeah, there's a few places at 3 years of income, but they're probably in areas where there's no retirees, so there'll be plenty of people still. So yeah, think about those who have well below median income. It's still, I guess some of them can buy units, but
so there's a couple of questions here. So basically, it's saying there's an 82% correlation. So essentially, as the median suburb house price increases, there's an 80% chance that the median income will increase.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That kind of thing, yeah.
And the next question is, so do I want to live in the orange suburbs, and can I hack the system basically, or use this chart to direct my property search to better than the rest of people looking for housing? Can I get into a livable suburb on the cheap? That's the question I want to answer using this.
Yeah, well, it depends on what your criteria are for where you want to live. So I've put a few other things. So this one, a lot of people just don't want to live in a poor area. So this time I've put the index of disadvantage. So you've got the Elizabeth area as in the top 10, and then a whole lot of suburbs in the middle, and then along here you've got hills type places, eastern suburbs, etc. And so the correlation here is 73%. It spreads around a lot at the top because some of these are, well, Medindi is a bit of an outlier. So
again, as house prices increase, there's a 73% chance that the index of deprivation the advantage will increase.
Yeah, actually, right? Advantage and disadvantage. So if you're thinking what's the nicest area I can get to for the least amount of money, then you're sort of looking along the bottom of here. Lightsview is a new suburb. Seaford Heights is a new suburb. Newport's a new suburb. So it's some of the places that were built in the last 10 years that are sort of on the cheaper end.
Fascinating.
Lakeview is another. Some of the housing there is new. Ayr is very new because I lived in Devon Park, just one suburb over from there, and while Ayr was being built and still being built.
What's the one on the bottom right, the really small one?
That'll be only one sale, so Ironbank in the Hills.
Okay, so that's the sample size is low, so I guess it'd be good to somehow restrict this to have a sample size of at least 10 or something like that. Okay, but this is fascinating.
Okay, now I've taken out the So I mean, the small ones, where there's only one or two sales, they were small spots anyway, so that you could see that they were small. But now those outliers are gone.
All right. So say I have, because you've got a significant amount of data there that's above $1 million in house prices. So are you able to truncate? So it's, say I have 600,000 Australian dollars, so 300,000 pounds. Awesome. Cool. So then the best bang for my buck in terms of advantage, or a livable suburb, if you like, to potentially use a pejorative term, I certainly don't intend to, is on the right, Newport.
Yep.
So I at least, and this is to the extent that this advantage and disadvantage variable adequately characterizes the livability of an area.
Yeah. So I guess that tells you how well off the people in those areas are.
Yeah.
And there's a few different indices. So there's one called disadvantage, which is similar, but so that this shows you, does this place have a lot of disadvantaged people? This one mixes in whether it has well-off people or not.
Yeah.
But then there's other.
What about the education and occupation one? What does that show?
Yeah. So that's similar. So Newport has well-off people, has probably people working at the submarine corp.
Yeah, there we go. That's the effect.
Or maybe it's just these smart people who have seen that Newport is relatively cheap.
Yeah.
The houses are new, they're small. Actually, a lot of Newport is units. So for the separate houses, well, there were 14 of them in that period, and I'm guessing they were relatively small houses.
Are you able to show that on the map, given we've talked about this so many times?
Okay, so if we go, so let's hop back to the map, and so Newport is here.
There we go. Funnily enough, I remember myself in my own efforts to find a place to live. I saw a bunch of incredible townhouses on Port Creek that were, I think they were 500,000, maybe between 400,000 and 500,000, but they were new. They were incredibly well appointed, with a water view. So it's interesting that this tool is giving me the same answer. So compared to my own efforts just to eyeball the market.
Another thing people care about is distance from the CBD, the city centre. And so if you are right in the city, then median is 1.5 million. Most of the nearby suburbs are more expensive, and if you want under 500,000, then well, there was Iron Bank, but after that you're looking all the way out at Salisbury North, 20 kilometres.
Okay, very interesting. So just for the nerds, where is Iron Bank? I love the fact that we've got these very obscure places that are coming.
Yeah, so that's out in the hills.
Okay, I thought it was.
There it is. Yeah. So and it's not really so some of these other suburbs, Crafers West, Crafers, Stirling, Aldgate, Bridgewater, they're places, they're kind of hill suburbs. Places like Iron Bank are a bit more rural, so there aren't actually that many homes in them.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been to Iron Bank, that's for sure. Cool. Could you go back to that scatter plot of distance?
Yep. Distance, this one.
I wouldn't have thought that Iron Bank was so close. It's showing 15 kilometers.
Yeah, well, it's straight line.
Okay.
It's longer to drive there. You've got to go up the freeway and around whatever roads, but yeah, so distance on the map might be different from how it will feel driving there.
Yeah, fascinating. So, because that distance was another question that came up for me as you were walking through the rest of this. So, is there something that combines these variables? I know I'm putting you on the spot multiple times in this call.
Something that combines them, there isn't.
So you want? Okay, no problem.
But yeah, I could set some code up to do that kind of thing. I could say what my my metric of how good a house is for me.
Yes.
Yeah, Will's House Utility Index.
Exactly.
And then you would and then that would still only give you what suburbs are optimal. You'd still have to really, it's not just a suburb utility, it's a house utility, and so you'd have to decide if it's one you want to live in, then how many rooms and what other things matter to you in a house.
Yeah, I mean, another one that's significant less for me is minimizing car use.
The census recorded how people got to work, and so you can look at which areas caught public transport to work.
Perfect.
So
sorry, another one is sorry to interrupt again,
yep.
but so public transport use and also the quality of the school. That's another huge driver of house prices, and once you have a kid.
Yeah. So yeah, I haven't done anything connected with school zones or anything like that. But just in the last week, I was making some maps for some people on what proportion of people drove to work on census day. So so this is how many people drove, but we can change that to who caught the train, and so we get the areas with train lines, so the south and the port area, and who caught the bus, and it's a lot places close to the city, but also especially out in the northeast where we have the O-Bahn, the bus that runs on rails.
There's been plenty of coverage every now and again that blows up on Reddit.
Yeah, when someone drives their car on the O-Bahn. And then train, we've got tram network with sort of one main line and
essentially this just illustrates all the public transit system network corridors in Adelaide. Yeah.
Yeah. And we can shift click to join them together.
Awesome. Hang on, you have to show us the ferry one. Surely there's nobody that catches the ferry.
Well, there's a ferry that crosses there's a ferry that crosses the River Murray. So interestingly,
fascinating.
The numbers are small, so there's only 10 in Manham, only 8 there, but it's but still, yeah, we have these ferries that cross the river at places where they couldn't build a bridge.
I love this. This is just an amazing way to it reveals the geography in really interesting ways.
Yeah, so if you go to Brisbane or Sydney, you'll find some bigger percentages along their rivers, but yeah, the only ferries that plus a few in these places that who might live in those places, but they were over in Sydney for the week.
Cool. Anyway, I interrupted you before. You were selecting, yeah.
So this shows it's sort of the poor areas, Elizabeth and Parks, where there's the biggest percentage of people who catch a ride with someone else to work. And then you got other things like motorbike and bicycle, and people who only walked. And there's a few people who walk, but mostly around the city. Worked at home is a fairly significant one. Now, this was during COVID, so the census was August 2021, so there were more people staying home than usual, especially in the hills, as it seems.
Fascinating.
There's also did not go to work.
Love it.
And
so you're able to combine train, bus, ferry, tram, light rail. Could you combine those to give us an impression of the most transit commute heavy suburbs?
Yeah, so it's the O-Bahn, the southern train lines, the tram line.
Yeah. So for my personal utility, I want to maximize that, maximize the education variable, and minimize the median house price for the suburb. I think those were those describe my personal utility profile.
Yep.
And sorry, school rating is another one.
Yep. I might before you put this one to air, I might see if I can make a composite index and give you a screenshot of a map like that.
Here's an animation of my housing utility index, combination of educational attainment, use of public transport to get to work, and minimizing median house prices. This animation showed that Bowden stays at the top from 2014 to 2024, finishing up with a combined score of 61. There's only 3 above 40, Forestville, Tonsley and Bowden. Moving on to a scatter plot of the same, we've got Bowden over here in 2024 with a composite index, in this case of 67. Let's play the animation again. And basically, most of the time, again, it's Bowden. Then finally, we have a map of the same data, recalling that Forestville, Tonsley and Bowden were the only ones above 40 on this utility score of my housing preferences. Let's have a look where they are. So this is Bowden, just on the other side of the train line, northwest of North Adelaide. That's the best suburb according to my criteria. Then we've got Forestville to the southwest of the Adelaide CBD with a composite index of 37. And finally, scoring between these two, Tonsley with a composite index something like 43. Crucially, the median house price for Tonsley is less than 700,000, whereas for Forestville presently the median price is $1 million, and likewise for Bowden $1 million. So overall, Tonsley appears to be worth a look.
In my showing it off, I'm hoping someone sees it and sees something that could be useful to them, and I can work with someone that way. I don't have too many business bones in my body.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Okay, well, I guess it's worth pointing out that you're a software development freelancer. So do you have any online profile or business URL that you want to tell listeners about?
I'm on LinkedIn, Eric Love, or you can go to mappage.net.au, play with all this and find all of my contact details in there.
Cool. All right. So if anybody has any software development requests, particularly around census data, real estate and mapping, they can come to you.
Yep.